2024, another year that has gone by, so many games that have released that we've played, and what a year it has been. One that we thought would be much quieter and mellowed out in comparison to 2023, where it felt like a new game was dropping every single week. However, 2024 has been quite a strong year with its own set of releases, especially if you're a fan of JRPGs and the plethora of different indie games that I'm sure we'll be talking about for years. There has been a lot here to really get into, and a good spread of different games from different genres that really are just great experiences all around. So there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of games that I didn't get to play, and there are some that just fell shy of this list. So before I do get into my top 10 games for this year, which is what this video will be about, I want to talk about 5 games that I really want to play in 2025 that I didn't get to experience this year, and then some honorable mentions as well that just fell shy of that list. But overall, this has been a great year for games in many ways, the games that actually released. There is a lot of other stuff that has come out surrounding the world of video games, which has been a bit more bleak and unstable. But in terms of the games that we've actually seen released this year, I would say that we've seen a fair few stellar games come out this year. So first and foremost, I want to kick it off with 5 games in 2025 that I want to play that I didn't get around to this year. First and foremost, I want to talk about Nine Souls. This game is a stylish Metroidvania that focuses on combat and has some Souls-like elements too. The hand-drawn art style alone has been enough to keep me interested in this one, and I'm kind of mad that I haven't got around to it this year. But yeah, if you haven't played this game, I'd suggest adding it to your wishlist on Steam and checking it out as well, because it looks like a really great game. Next up is Animal Well, the first game from Big Mode, Donkey's publishing joint. And I've heard nothing but great things about this one, and I'm keen to get around to experiencing all the secrets of Animal Well and its solo developer, Billy Basso, and what he has in store. This game really does seem like such a great experience, and I've heard a lot of great things about how this game unfolds and the experience that it provides for people who have actually played the game. If you've played either of these, by the way, let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. The next game is a remaster of an older game, and that is Soul Reaver Remastered from the Legacy of Kain series. I remember borrowing these from the video shop back when I was a kid, and yes, for those unfamiliar, we used to go to these stores where we would borrow physical copies of the latest games that would release and play them. I played both Soul Reaver 1 and 2 on their respective PlayStation versions, and despite never finishing them, Raziel had such a badass design, and the world and the way that you could shift between two different planes was always something that was so awesome and stuck with me. And I'm like, now is a great opportunity to just go back and play those games, because I've tried playing the PC versions. I've got the versions on the PS2 now as an adult, they're just on that backlog and I haven't had a chance. So with these remasters, it's given me a good nudge to actually just get back in there and actually finish these games, and I'm really looking forward to righting that wrong and finishing those games in the new year. The next one is Never, a new game from Nomada Studios, the talented team behind Gris, a platformer based around a girl who uses her voice to bring color back to the world, exploring themes surrounding grief, loss, and relationships. Never looks to be telling a different story with some more combat-oriented aspects, and the soundtrack as well is being done by Berlinis, and it's honestly, man, the soundtrack for Gris was so good. So if Never is just got the same composer, the same art, the same team working on this, I'm so sure that this is going to be another excellent game. As well, anyone who has played this, you can let me know down below. But yeah, that's one that I'm wanting to. The last one is Pacific Drive. This one's been on my list for a while, and I've been intrigued by this game since I saw the trailer drop back at one of PlayStation's showcases all those years ago. I currently have loaded this one up on Steam, and I've got it ready to go. I'm eager to play it at some point. It looks really interesting, and it has that bend of survival mechanics and exploration, and I'm keen to see how it all comes together. And it really has that cool stalker aesthetic as well. And yeah, man, this is one that I also feel like I just wish I got around to in the year, maybe next year. And for all of these games, I'm wanting to make a video in some capacity, just highlighting and talking about my thoughts with them as well. Same can be said for the honorable mentions on this list as well. These are games that just fell shy of making that list. At some point in the year, in the new year for many of these games, I will want to talk about these games too. But the first one, and the first honorable mention that I would like to talk about, is Stellar Blade. So I did a video on this earlier in the year, and man, it was a fantastic hack and slash game that had some Souls-like elements as well, and it borrowed a lot of influence from its narrative beats from the Automata. a little too much for my liking, but overall I thought it was a pretty cool game. I love Stellar Blade the closer it drew towards its final act, because that's when the game really did feel like it came into its own, and seriously, whilst it didn't make this list, it was a ton of fun to play, and I'd love to see where the new AAA Scene Studio Shift Up goes with this one, and how they continue Eve's journey going forward, because I do think they have something really cool on their hands, and I think Stellar Blade 2 may hit 10 times harder than Stellar Blade 1, and if that's anything to go by, then I think we're in for a good time. The next game just fell shy of making the list, and that's Warhammer 40k's Space Marine 2, as I've put some solid hours into this game, and man, I absolutely love this one, but unfortunately I haven't put enough time into it to fully assess and review all the different components of this game. But like, it needs to be said, this game is fantastic. It has a lot going for it, from the way it handles like hordes and different enemies and how they come in and you have to defend a point, the different operations that you can go onto with your like co-op companions, the different missions that you can do is fantastic, and the world, man, is so detailed. And I've just been getting into Warhammer recently, just becoming a fan and everything, and even with my like micro knowledge of this universe, it is so easy to just throw me in, get me engaged, and follow Titus, who is a sick badass character, by the way. And man, the grimdark world and the grimdark future of Warhammer 40k is just something else, and I'm really liking Space Marine 2, and I will have a video on that in the new year. The last game and the last honorable mention on this list is one that I've put a solid amount of hours into as well, but haven't finished, and that is Mullet Mad Jack, an FPS that takes from games like Post Void, but lives on the aesthetics of an 80s anime neo-future setting, and has these cool roguelike elements as well that play into each run that you make as well. It's a really extremely fun game to play. It has you living on a 10-second timer where every kill of an enemy extends your lifespan, and you can get these cool little upgrades as you go floor to floor trying to rescue a streamer who has been kidnapped. It's a sick game, and I'm going to be making a video on this one as well in the new year, so keep an eye on that as well. And yeah, without further ado, that is all the games I want to play in the new year from this year, and these are the honorable mentions of what I've got to play but haven't really felt, they just fell shy of the list for various different reasons. So without further ado, let's get into my top 10 for 2024. To kick this Game of the Year list off, the first game that makes it on this list is one that came around at the tail end of the year and really surprised many of us, myself included, and that was Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which was a really incredible action-adventure game that places Indiana Jones in a first-person perspective, prioritizing hand-to-hand combat along with your trusty whip and improvised weapons that you find in the sandbox. It's really different in a lot of ways to many other prior Indiana Jones games that we've played in the past, where it would have that type of third-person perspective and kind of mirror the type of gameplay formulas that would come along with Uncharted later on. Here in Indiana Jones though, it really does take a different angle, and that first person perspective surprisingly works really well, and there's so much here that Indy does that I think makes for a really interesting game. Like, there's these little open hub areas where you can take side quests and then go out into these open areas and complete many of these different objectives, and you can go to different types of Nazi camps, and there's different little things here and discoveries and tombs and things that you can find that really make the side content feel worthwhile. And there's different ways that you can approach many of these areas too, from going in loud and starting to punch and swing hands with everybody to a more stealthy approach. And there's a ton of different puzzles that are in this game as well, and the platforming puzzles, the action, it all works so well. And I think that Indiana Jones really, it's a great adventure game, and I think many of us went in thinking about this game being like an Uncharted game or more like the Emperor's Tomb from back in the day, but really does come into its own as a video game. And I think that I've seen a lot of people calling this an immersive sim, and whilst I wouldn't go that far myself, I do get where they're coming from. There is a lot of ways that you can kind of improvise and make your own fun and solve situations, not just puzzles, but the way that you navigate enemies and getting past different people. There is different routes and ways to approach a level. And I think that overall the Great Circle does a really good job, and it does deliver a satisfying Indiana Jones adventure that falls really in place with that original trilogy and feels right at home, like it came out back in the day. And I think that this is a great game and one really worth checking out. And yeah, it was a great way to kind of send off the year, and I'm hoping that we can see more out of Indy, but even if this is just a one-off, it is really one worth experiencing and one worth talking about and playing through. And if you have Game Pass, it's absolutely worth your time. The next game At number 9 is Persona 3 Reload, which is a remake of the original Persona 3. And this one is an absolute ride, and what a way to kick off the year. Releasing in early February, Persona 3 Reload was a great game, and Reload in my eyes is a near definitive way to experience that original Persona 3 story, with all the flourishes, polish that arrived with the base game, and many of these new features and functions that would come in Persona 4 and 5 also implemented here into 3, and it's great. I think it's fantastic. As someone who was playing Portable late last year and early into this year, and then loading up Reload, I think that there was a lot of things there that I liked about Portable, and I've played like a good chunk of Fez, and I think that there is a lot there that I really enjoyed with those versions of the game, and I think obviously that expansion being bundled in with Fez is still a strength. I'll get to that in a second, but I think overall Reload really does accomplish telling the story in a great way. It has the fully voiced social links, it has new features into the combat like the Theurgy attacks, and it includes the things like switching and shifting characters, and it also has like tons of other little flourishes. And I think overall the biggest gripe that I had with the original Persona 3 is the tedious nature of Tartarus and traversing Tartarus, and I think overall the way that it handles each block, making it feel less tedious and more engaging with extra little tidbits, and also the way that it even stylistically changes up Tartarus, I think is really nice. Overall, I guess my biggest gripe with Persona 3 Reload would be just how it handles some more moody aspects of Persona 3's original aesthetic, and I do think that some of that is lost in translation here, and especially with the new engine and color palettes and things of that nature, you can feel a bit of that atmosphere is taken away here in Reload, and it was something that I think, especially towards the later ends of the game, did feel a lot better in the original. But overall, I think that they understood the assignment and they did a really great job with Reload. If you are someone who's yet to play a Persona game, then Persona 3 Reload is a great jumping on point, and I think it is a very fun game. If you are someone who is more of a fan of the original like Persona 1 and 2 and the SMT games, 3 is probably going to feel a bit easier than the original, and that may dissuade you a little bit. But if you are someone who has played Persona 4 and 5 and you're looking to see where that modern Persona started, then yeah, Reload is a great game, definitely worth playing. There is so many like new things here in this game as well that I really liked as well, like the new songs like Color Your Night and It's Going Down. You've probably heard them on TikTok before, but they're still on regular rotation in my gaming playlist, and overall this game is just an absolute banger and a great time. It'll run you 60 hours like any Persona game will, but it is incredible, and I'm looking forward to what Atlus puts out next with Persona 6, but I don't think this will be the last that we see of Atlus this year, but more on that later. Next up, at number 8, we have one of the heavy hitters for 2024 for a lot of people, and that was the roguelike deck builder that combines the world of poker and makes for a game that really sinks its claws into you and becomes absolutely incredible. I, of course, my friends, am talking about Balatro. Balatro is one of those games that is easily accessible despite looking like there are many different variables that shake up the experience. It still remains comprehensive, and it is easy even as a non-gamer to get addicted to this one. In my review for Balatro, I talked about the underlining genius that plays into it, where there is essentially two games that are neatly threaded together into one experience. And I don't want to retread old ground, but the way that this game accomplishes this is absolutely genius, where it provides short bursts of excitement with its round-based card games, and another game in its long-form roguelike deck-building mechanics. Balatro is one of those games that I've picked up and I return to even now after putting that video out, and I've talked about how much I love this game, and I swear, the endless mode and watching people and how much better they are than me at this game, it just keeps me invested, and it's fun to revisit and play. On top of that, there is regular updates with new Joker cards as well, and the experience is exciting too, with an overall, it's just unreal. Like, there's so many new things that are just being added to this, and the game at its base function as well, like what the game is incredible, and there's so much here to unlock. Like, man, if you have this, like if you just have a mobile, you have Steam, you have a console, this one is worth picking up and worth checking out. It's a ton of fun and you'll easily get addicted. I absolutely love Balatro, and the only thing that I don't like is the fact that it took me so long to boot this game up for the first time and actually get addicted to it. But yeah, number 8 is Balatro. That game is something else, and the fact that it even got a nomination for a Game of the Year really just speaks to the volumes of how many people are on the hamster wheel playing this game repetitively and just getting addicted to its gameplay loop, because man, this game is a really great time, and for that reason, it's number 8 on my list. Next up, we have one of the best expansions to release this year and in recent years, to be honest. It was so good that people were saying that this game was worthy of a Game of the Year, and it even got nominated for Game of the Year. An expansion of all things, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, which ultimately culminated in providing players more Elden Ring at a large scale. Now look, I don't know if this game should be considered for the Game of the Year, but to me, I think it makes this list in some capacity because I think it's a crazy achievement and a great expansion. When I just think about Miyazaki and how he pitched this game to us, he said, alright, this game's going to be about the size of Limgrave from the base, making it sound like, you know, a 10-20 hour experience max. Like, man was underselling his own DLC here, thinking none of us would notice. Shadow of the Erdtree is exceptionally large in scale. It is a 50-hour game to just complete with tons of content, optional bosses, main bosses, beautiful art direction, beautiful score and soundtrack that accompanies both the biomes, the places that you visit, and the enemies you fight. There is so much here that Erdtree does that is on the same scale and on par with its Elden Ring base game counterpart. However, there is a few things with Erdtree that I feel do hold it back, even if we were to put it into that Game of the Year category for contention. And that is that I feel like essentially this is a 1.5, it is an expansion. Everyone talks about this like it is a whole new game entirely, and I don't feel that's the case. I feel like it is a fantastic expansion that builds and has more of what we love from the base game to a large scale. It is fantastic in that regard, but there are things that I feel like with the Erdtree fragments and how they handle progression that I feel could be better. I feel like there could be a bit more to the build crafting that they could have added into this expansion that really could have elevated it. And this isn't to dig at the game in any way. I think Erdtree is a phenomenal expansion, but I think that overall what it ultimately is for me is a damn fine expansion. More of what is already great is what shines here in Erdtree, not much new stuff. And I'm okay with that personally. And I think that this ties up a lot of loose ends for Elden Ring. I think Erdtree is this perfect send-off for one of the best games of the decade, tying up loose ends with its lore, providing some more brilliant locations, some brilliant fights, and one last hurrah, one victory lap for FromSoft before they move on to their next project. And honestly, I can't really complain because Elden Ring is a fantastic game and Erdtree is more of that fantastic high bar that was set back in 2022. So Shadow of the Erdtree is a phenomenal expansion and it is my 7th best experience of this year. Next up, we have number 6 on this list, which I haven't really spoken about on the channel, but I've been playing and really enjoying in many different departments, and so much so that I really do want to do a video on the channel at some point for this game. And that game is none other than Black Myth Wukong. Now this game took the internet by storm back when it released in August, and since I've started playing this, I've been having a ton of fun with it. I feel like a lot of what makes Black Myth such an exhilarating experience for me stems from the world that it crafts, the environments, the sheer variety of enemies that you face, the mythos that comes to life in this world, and the sheer spectacle of it all. It is insane, and it feels like so grand in scale. The last time I feel like I've seen something like this is when we saw Kratos face off against the Greek pantheon back in the early 2000s, except here we're getting an extension of the classic Chinese tale Journey to the West, and we're getting it told through this lens that's exposing more of the Chinese mythos as well to us, and I think all of it is just phenomenally done. And I think for me, the thing that I really like about Black Myth the most is the way that it handles like that feeling, the explore, like just being in the world of Wukong, and the combat itself does feel fun, it looks cool. I do question so much how the progression actually feels and how deep the combat is in of itself, because I don't think there is a ton of depth to Wukong's combat, but I do feel like it looks nice and the different stances make it feel different enough throughout my playthrough. I do feel like there's also some things with the pacing for this game that do hold it back a little bit for me sometimes, with some chapters feeling very short and others just feeling like they go on for a while. And I do feel that there's the obvious things like the invisible walls and some other issues with exploration and how different things break up that I have a few lingering feelings about that don't quite hit the mark for me. But overall, I feel like the complaints versus the overwhelming greatness that this game gets in terms of its scale, the spectacle, the fights, especially many of these boss encounters, like the big main story ones. There is a level of grandness and grandeur to the scale of this game, and I think it is great. I think there is tons of boss encounters, there's tons here to kind of partake in, that Wukong does feel like a great game. And I think for a studio that's new to the world of AAA games like Game Science, they've absolutely delivered and provided for me so far, and I'm 30 to 40 hours into this one, and I think I'm just running around trying to turn over every stone and see if there is anything I've missed, and so far, for the most part, I've enjoyed a majority of the experience that is Wukong. There are some little flourishes and some things that I think that need to iron out if they're going to make a sequel or their next game that I think hold it back from having that little X factor, but overall I think this is a very solid experience and a very fun one at that. And I think when we look back at Wukong and when you ask people in a year from now what they really loved about this game, it will be that interaction in the world, the environment, the different bosses, more so than the mechanical depth or combat or things like that. And I think to me, that's where Game Science has absolutely excelled, is bringing the mythos, the world, and overall the sheer spectacle of these fights to life. And I mean, what more can you really ask for? And with that, that's my number 6 for this year, Black Myth Wukong. So now we are here at the top 5 games, the real meat of it all, my top 5 games of 2024. And the first here at number 5 is 1000X Resist. This game immediately hooked me and is an absolutely incredible video game. And honestly, it's one of the best narrative experiences that I've had all year, and one in recent memory, to be honest. Seriously, there is so much with what this game delivers on with many of its plot points, the mechanisms and how it tells its story, and melds the creative outlets and expression that is just so unique to video games. There are so many different themes and things that this game kind of pulls from, and it just does it so seamlessly. The studio Sunset Visitor have done an exceptional job with this experience and have crafted an unforgettable one at that will stick with you once you have completed it. I mean, to this day, I'm still thinking about it. I absolutely adore this game, and the only reason I'm keeping this segment brief is because to get into the nuts and bolts of how this game functions or its narrative beats feels like I'm robbing you of an experience in a way. Because all I can say is this is a game that never left my mind after picking it up and hasn't since completing it. And honestly, my one piece of advice from this video is to check that game out, because I really did love this game, but please go in as blind as possible. Just know this is a very narrative heavy game and it's a bit light on combat mechanics and things of that nature, but it's definitely worth checking out because this story is one that I found really compelling, really great, and one of the best indie games that I've played this year. Honestly, fantastic game, and that is my number 5. On the flip side of everything that made 1000X Resist shine to me as a number 5, number 4 is none other than Astro Bot, an action platformer from Team Asobi that you all know now as 2024's Game of the Year, officially nominated, which honestly is one of the most wondrous and joyful games to grace us in 2024. I think seriously, this game, like I said in my review for it, it's just crazy to consider that this game is just got so much variety, so many ideas, and it's just so fun to play through, and it is one of those games that just transports you back to a place in time. This is a game that reminds me of when I got my PS2 as a kid and I was just playing old platformers and just the fun of enjoying video games for their games, just the mechanics, just all this stuff that you're not really thinking about it and over analyzing it too deeply, but it's just fun. It's just good times and it's just great. And I think with the analyzing kind of gamer brain that we have now in these days where we can look at these things, I think that if we are to get technical about it, what makes this game so good is the amount of variety in its levels, the different mechanics that are on offer, and the different little gadgets that Astro has as well. Not to mention all the little cameos that are a nice homage to the years and decades of PlayStation's different IP. And in some ways it's kind of sad to just see that they still acknowledge that some things exist even though they haven't put a game out for it in however many years. But man, Astro Bot is a great game, and it's crazy to consider that in the month of August, Sony would release a game that would be one of the biggest commercial flops of all time in Concord, and you know, a live service that peaked at 697 around launch, which we all are familiar with at this point. But then it happened that in the next month there was just a true shock, because Sony would go on to release Astrobot, one of the best games of the year, and now a new modern mascot for Sony that celebrates the console's long-running history. Like, that whole thing is just a crazy turn of events to happen within like this little vacuum of time. Astrobot is one of those games, it's just oozing with creativity, character, and is one of the few games that takes full control of the DualSense controller's capabilities at every chance it gets. If you played Astro's Playroom and enjoyed it, Astrobot is a complete evolution on what that bite-sized tech demo accomplished. The levels, gadgets, different arrays of levels on offer, it's just also brilliantly designed, and I'm just sitting here repeating myself, gushing over it, but honestly, this is just like, Astrobot was a throwback, like I've said, and this is a fantastic game, and if you are a PlayStation owner, man, just check this one out, because you will not regret it. Next up, at number 3, we have one of the games that kicked off 2024 and was one of my favorites of this year, and it was truly just such a memorable experience in so many ways, and that is none other than Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. And seriously, this game just was the gift that kept on giving, and it saw both our favorite 2 protagonists in the series make a return, with Ichiban and Kiryu getting up to new antics in the tropical backdrop of Hawaii. There is so much content in this game, and it feels like one of RGG's most expansive experiences here. And I know Yakuza 5 has like so much going on, but here in Infinite Wealth, like, there is like a whole Pokédex and Pokemon minigame where you collect people and you battle, and then it's got like, it feels like a whole Pokemon game packed into a like a Dragon, like Yakuza game. And that's just one thing, and then you've got this other game where you're riding around a bike doing like deliveries like it's Crazy Taxi. It's insane, and it is comical, and it's got that charm that only RGG know how to really pull off in these open world, like these types of experiences. They've got that craft, and they just get it. They get the assignment, and they've made something truly fantastic here, and it's absolutely great. But then on the more serious side, and with the narrative beats, this game really does deliver one of the more impactful stories in the Like a Dragon series, both for Kiryu and for Ichiban. I'm not going to get too much into the details on that, because I do think for anyone who's a fan of this series, it's worth checking out, and I don't want to detract any of that from you. But yeah, man, if you're not a fan of the turn-based combat, that does see a return here. But I do think that they've, and whilst I do feel the game can be a little grindy, I do feel like they have kind of added a lot more to make the game feel a little less bogged down and a little like less repetitive. I think that there's a lot more like environmental kind of stuff you can do. There's a lot more classes. There's just a lot more of like built on top of Like a Dragon, like Yakuza Like a Dragon that released a couple of years back. But if you're not a fan of that, I do feel like many of the same problems that were found in that game, especially with the grind and then having some like monotonous bosses and things like that, they may rear their head here, and you may not be a fan of that. But for me, it wasn't really enough to detract from the experience. And man, this game, it's just like, there is so much going on, there's so many areas to explore, and is truly just a fantastic game, and one that is really worthwhile checking out. And you will get a little bit of the brawling when you get to play as Kiryu. He does have an ult that allows him to do a little bit of his free form, like out of the turn-based combat, but for the most part, this game still does have that. So if you're looking for more of the brawler elements of the Yakuza series, then this one may not be doing it for you. But if you were a fan of everything that Like a Dragon put down, and you like just the more free open social side and the sub stories and things like that, then this game really did deliver. And yeah, man, Infinite Wealth was a great, fantastic game, and I love that turn-based stuff, and I'm keen to see where RGG goes next with their next game. We are now here at number 2, and between this and number 1, it truly is neck and neck. And without a doubt, for the majority of the year, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was my game of the year. There is something special that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did for me. Having replayed the original FF7 the year prior, and also replaying through both Remake and Crisis Core, I couldn't help but worry with the direction they would take the story, and how they would handle the open world, and all these different variables of Rebirth. Like, how is this all going to come together? And seriously, that replay of the original FF7 in 2023 really enshrined it as one of my favorite RPGs and video game worlds, and man, there was just something about Final Fantasy VII that is just incredible. So with that being said, Rebirth felt like it brought all of those different landmarks of Gaia to life, and not only recaptured the magic of the original Final Fantasy VII's world, added a ton of new content that further explores the characters and Cloud's relationship with the party. Rebirth adds new quests that further depict the juxtaposition between the bustling megacity of Midgar and the rest of the world. And my god, does it add one of the most enjoyable card games into a Final Fantasy that rivals that of Triple Triad. Hell yeah, dude, they've managed to top it, and Queen's Blood is just, it is so goddamn fun that I would not be surprised if they're going to release their own like Pokemon trading card game or Marvel Snap equivalent of Queen's Blood. Square, there's an idea, you know, like this is just so good. Like there is so much there that people would want to play more of this as an independent standalone game. Also, that has its own storyline too, like it's insane, and that is just one facet of this game. There is so much content in this game, some that people would say there is too much game in this game. There is a lot of mini games, yes, and if you like that, you're in for a treat. And I think that there's these really cool things like the Proto-Relic storylines and things like this, a lot of side story content that actually plays in really well and gives a more broader understanding to the broader story at play in this game. And I think having missed some of the side content is like, it's like this should be in the main story. There's like a lot going on here, and it's like, it's crazy that they're that confident that they're willing to be like, yeah, if you miss that, that's all good, you know, whatever, you know, just go out there and find it. There's so many like cool little hidden things in this game, and I think like Rebirth has done an excellent job. And yes, there are some of the tropes that we find in our modern open world games. You know, you've got the cool little towers that'll show you where stuff are, and there's a few things to scan here and there, but I don't think that that is enough to really weigh down the experience for me, because I think all the things like Rebirth didn't need to reinvent the wheel of open world games. It just needed to reignite the magic of FF7 for me, and I think in so many ways it does that. And it does that outside of those like design tropes. There is so many other unique things that it does very well. Like there's a whole Colosseum that you can battle in, two by the way, and then there's like a card game, there's side quests. Like they made a freaking escort mission so fun to do because of the music that bops. The storyline unfolds as you're running this like journey and escorting a bloody dog. Like, man, I'm just like, I don't get how they did it, but this game really was truly something special, and I absolutely loved Rebirth. And I feel like when it's all said and done, if that third part delivers a satisfying conclusion, we will be looking back kindly on this trilogy. And Rebirth, for me, is definitely one to really remember, and one experience that like will stick with me. And I really loved it, and I think it was one of the best games that came out this year. If my thumbnails are anything to go by, my game of the year for 2024 is pretty obvious, and that of course is Metaphor ReFantazio. Atlus have had an exceptional year, kicking it out of the park with Persona 3 Reload early in the year, having SMT Vengeance release mid-year, and then closing off the year with Metaphor ReFantazio, ending on a really strong note. It's important to mention Atlus's other two core pillar IPs, because Metaphor ReFantazio feels like a true evolution of the turn-based formula, and the strengths combining both the turn-based side of SMT with the social sides of Persona. Everything in Metaphor is so expertly crafted and feels intentional in its design. The sense of both art and game direction are so intentional and thought out here in their design, that what they're trying to express, what they want the player to feel, and the sense of style and substance that you seldomly get hand in hand. There is something more that I feel Metaphor speaks to, and that is, to me as a fan of this style of game that these Persona games engender, Metaphor feels shorter, but it isn't to say that it isn't long, but more compact, fine-tuned with this type of content that it presents the player. The various main and side dungeons, they make more of an awe-inspiring globe-trotting adventure across the world of Uchronia, and it pulls away from the more tedious tropes that are generally found in JRPGs. Whether it is repeat, mindless low-level encounters, whether it is random encounters, whether it is those dungeons that you know in Persona like Tartarus or Mementos, where it's just this endless area where you go to grind, swapped out in favor for more unique smaller dungeons that have their own puzzles, their own visual aesthetic. You can really tell that there was a lot of ideas here to bring this world to life, that Uchronia has a certain type of personality, visual flair and style that the team were working on, not just in the terms of visual presentation, but the people, the world, and who lived in this world, who came in the past and who currently lives there too. I think that it really does make for an interesting universe to explore in a way that I think Persona and SMT can't quite replicate with their more contemporary setting. And I think that they've done an excellent job here with Metaphor, and recent articles suggest that they want to make this another pillar of Atlus's pedigree, and I think that is a fantastic idea, because as much as I love the works of SMT and Persona, I think that Metaphor and this more fantasy leaning backdrop really does lend itself to making something that is just purely awe-inspiring in its fiction and does lead to some more interesting evolutions in the realm of JRPGs. Which ultimately brings me to my next point, and another big reason why I feel like I give the Game of the Year nod to Metaphor, and it is ultimately that I think that there is a distinction between Metaphor and Final Fantasy Rebirth for me, which is established in how incredible Rebirth is as a modernization for a JRPG and what it was, and it adapts it to be more accommodating, to fit the mold for a more modern audience, making a more hybrid system of turn-based RPGs along with an action-oriented type of system, and it still does preserve some of the roots of that type of formula that it established, but leans into a different direction. But I think Metaphor for me is a true evolution of what JRPGs can be. It brings about the sense of wonder, adventure, and thrill that old school fantasies would invoke. I think of the original Final Fantasy VII as a point of reference for that. Metaphor has its own unique spin on the gameplay, from its approach to turn-based combat, the gameplay systems, and the finely crafted world of politics, ideals, and how fiction plays an integral role on impacting reality. I think the biggest thing for me that I'm trying to establish with this point is that there is this big kind of statement, especially with like JRPGs these days, where it feels like there's this pivot to move away from turn-based combat, especially with Square Enix, where they want to move towards a more hybrid action focus. You've seen it with Final Fantasy 16 last year, and you even seen with the remakes for Final Fantasy 7 that it leans to a hybrid between action and turn-based. And whilst I love that for Rebirth, I do think that this turn-based formula, it isn't something that is dead and buried. It's something like something that is kind of a remnant of an older time. I think it can still work and works very well. I think the Persona games are very indicative of that, but then with Metaphor, I think it can still work in a fantasy setting, and it shows that these types of games, these types of universes and worlds, and the way that they were crafted is still very much in demand and something that people are still clamoring for. And I think to me that sense of wonder that Metaphor brings about, it kind of harkens back to what made that run back on the PS1 for Final Fantasy, especially Final Fantasy VII, such a popular game and something that clicked with a lot of people, and it was something that transported you into that world of fiction. And I think in this modern age and era, Metaphor ReFantasio has been able to accomplish that for me in a way that I don't think many other games could. So yeah, man, Metaphor ReFantasio is my game of the year because of what it represents for the genre and everything that I adore about it, and it feels like a perfect encapsulation and culmination of everything that Atlus has been working for over their decades of like games, and it just is so, it shines so brightly in this game. You can see so much of SMT and so much of Persona, and it just works, and it's so succinct, compact, and it doesn't feel bloated in its design either. It feels like it runs the right amount of time. It has strong, stunning visual presentation that feels like no menu, no city, no monster, nothing. They didn't really like cheap out on anything. They went all in. The audio soundtrack with the metaphors rapping monk is iconic. The grand chants, the orchestral pieces, everything. It really just brings the vibe, atmosphere of this game to life. It's like everything that they thought of, it just collectively meshes together and makes a unique experience that is just simply unforgettable. And a narrative that was as compelling and rich and full of like the thematic ideas that will stick with you and kind of make you question many ideas, like the power of fiction and the impact that fiction can carry onto our world. And man, after finishing this game, Metaphor makes a strong argument for the impact and influence that fiction can carry onto those who consume it. And that's why, in summary, Metaphor ReFantasio is my game of the year. I've been thinking a lot about how to close out this video, and there's been so many different things that have happened this year, so many memorable experiences, and it's been a huge year of growth for me and for the channel. And we've seen so many fantastic games release, and 2024 has just been a big surprise for me, honestly, in terms of the video games that we've got to play, that we've seen drop, and what we are seeing on the horizon come 2025. It's been an incredible year, and being here, being able to cover games, it's just been and so fun, and just chatting about it with people. It's a big reason why I made this channel in the first place, is just to yap away and talk about video games. So if you are someone who subscribed a week ago or 2 years ago when I started making content, I just want to say thank you for supporting the channel, commenting on the videos, and just showing up and even viewing any of my videos. It means a lot to me, and I truly do love just yapping away about video games, and I just appreciate you coming by and stopping by and just sharing your thoughts or listening in on what I have to say. And yeah, I'm going to be doing more of that in the new year, making some new content, and I have plans to explore some new things too. But 2024 has shown that there's incredible games and that we got more to look forward to in the new year. So I'm going to get to work on some new videos, and I'm working on some new reviews too for some games that I don't have a review out for that made this top 10 as well. But with all that said, I hope you had a great Christmas. I hope you have a great holiday and a great new year, and I'll see you in the new year with some new videos. Thanks for watching and have a good one.